Hey guys, my name is Daniel Vandruff, and I'm a real estate expert here at Tamarindo Real Estate. And I'm also here with another expert, more on the legal side, Fredrick Schiebel from Unique Law, who's going to tell us a little thing or two about what are the most important things about purchasing property here in Costa Rica.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me. Let's talk about legal aspects of buying properties in Costa Rica.
What are the first steps a buyer should take when considering purchasing property in Costa Rica?
That's a great question. I always recommend that the client or the buyer always hires, first of all, a real estate agent that is savvy on the area that they have interest on, and also at the same time engage with a real estate attorney, an attorney that specializes in real estate, that can team up with your agent, whichever agent you decide. And we've done this in the past with several transactions and clients, because it's nothing better in a transaction, a real estate transaction, when both the agent and the legal counsel know what they're doing and can actually advise the client accordingly to what their investment is going to look like.
I think one of the first things that you need to consider as a buyer is your purpose with the property. Are you trying to spend a lot of time here, spend 6 months during the year? Are you a snowbird that wants to come during the winter time? Or are you someone that's trying to find an investment property that's going to be generating Airbnb revenue, and you're going to be able to maintain it with just a property manager and be able to leave and come back and be able to enjoy the property whenever you want? All of those things are extremely valuable. What is it that I'm planning to do with my property in Costa Rica?
Yeah, 100%. And according to that, then the real estate attorney jumps in and actually makes some sort of a risk assessment, to actually understand the risk tolerance of the client, and know, for example, if you're going to buy a condominium that produces income, and you're going to put it out on the short-term rental pool, does the client know that you have to pay taxes in Costa Rica to be able to actually indulge in that commercial activity? Because it's actually considered a commercial activity. Does the client want to buy raw land to build a house from scratch, to use it for its personal use, or even to flip it, as we call it, or put it out for sale in the market? So according to that starting point, we make a special assessment together with the agent to be able to actually advise the client properly and make their investment count, make their investment be a joyful and pleasant experience in the country.
So Fredrick, what exactly is a title search, and why is that so important for a buyer to know?
Thank you, Daniel. A title search is literally a search that you do in time, in history of a title, since the moment that that title or that property number was assigned to that piece of land in specific, and was, how we call it in Costa Rica, born in public records. In Costa Rica, we have one single public registry that basically holds the information of absolutely every single registered vehicle and property in Costa Rica. And through public records, we can actually go back in time and confirm and review every single document that produced the change of ownership of that title since it was first registered in public records. It's one of the most important things to confirm and consider during due diligence, just to make sure that there's no clouds on the title, and that the title has also been correctly transferred in time, and obviously that every single action or transaction that led to the change of hands of that title have been legally recorded and legally actually closed. So no titles can eventually pop up in the title in the future, even though there's no clouds in the title right now.
So Fredrick, you mentioned due diligence, which is obviously the most important part of the process. What is the due diligence starter pack here in Costa Rica?
Yeah, we just talked a little bit about title search in Costa Rica, which is one of the most important matters to confirm during due diligence. But there's also basic items that you have to confirm during a due diligence process. For example, that the property has access to legal water and electricity availability, It's not enough to just confirm that the property has a meter connected.
Yeah.
Many times in Costa Rica, and especially in Guanacaste, those meters are not necessarily legal. That's one of the most important things to confirm. Also, if you're buying a fully built construction, a fully built structure, that it has construction permits, but not only the permits, that the plans actually match what is actually built on the property. If there's any environmental permit that has had to be approved before actually building the property, because the construction site is over 500 square meters. Also, that the property is up to date with real estate taxes, that it's up to date with HOA fees if applicable. A good example is the client wants to buy a house that is located inside a condominium subject to the condominium law regime, and the client has dogs. Does the condominium allow having dogs, or any type of pet in the house, in the condominium? Also, not only confirm that the legal aspect of the house and the property is in proper form and it actually checks all the boxes, but also a on-site inspection. It's very important, and you know that we've carried out several on-site inspections on different transactions that we've been together, and it's very important because not only for the client to know exactly what they're buying, but for own personal responsibility, which the only one benefiting at the end is the client. That we confirm that everything in the house and the property works as it is supposed to work. Also, that if you're buying raw land, or if you're buying a standalone home, do a survey study to confirm that all the boundaries are correctly marked, that there's no type of encroachment between the survey and the neighbor's surveys. And there are many other items such as soil studies, land use certificates if it's raw land and the client wants to build a tower of 3 different stories and make the property subject to the condominium law regime. There are several different items, and we can go as deep as we want in due diligence according to the client's needs and the client's intention with this investment in specific.
Disclosure is always important. So Fredrick, a really unique example is that there's a lot of properties out here that don't have the utilities, don't have the electricity, don't have the water meter installed. Would you say that's a recommendable purchase for a lot of investors that are looking to buy something that'll eventually appreciate over the next 3 to 5 years, potentially being able to get those utilities? Maybe they don't have the utilities right now, but during that process, they'll be able to acquire the utilities, and 3-5 years from now might be able to obtain them, and then the property definitely appreciates in value.
That's a great question, and I believe everything goes back to risk tolerance, right? Yeah. There's many clients that want to buy property to be able to, start building right away. There's clients that just want to buy property to aim for the future, to aim for the near future, maybe 3, 4, 5 years, to be able to obtain the legal water availability, legal electricity availability, in order to be able to actually start developing the property and for the property to gain more value and be able to sell it for more money, just the property itself or even fully built property. So that's a great question. And yes, the answer is yes, any property can be sold with electricity, with water, or without them. Yeah. It doesn't limit the actual transfer of the title between people, between third parties. One important thing to consider is that in Costa Rica, there's different ways, and it doesn't apply to every property, but there's different ways of obtaining water, and it not necessarily has to be granted by the local water authority or one of its branches that we call asadas in Costa Rica. For example, you can build an artisan well on a property, and depending where it's located, you can obtain construction permits with an artisan well. You can also drill a well, get the permits for the drilling of the well, and then get the permits to actually use and enjoy the water that comes out from that drill well. And for example, artisan wells don't need construction permits. And you can actually, as mentioned, get construction permits with a water well to build your house. So it's not the worst case scenario of not having a connected water or electricity meter, and it's not the worst case scenario always when you don't have the ASADA or the local water institution, which we call AIA, which stands for Acueductos y Alcantarillados, there's other ways of actually obtaining water.
Yeah.
It doesn't apply to every single property, but the majority of properties, depending where they're located, there's a big chances that you can obtain water through other sources.
The question is, with a non-registered well, can you build a house? Really?
That's a good question, and yes, those are called artisan wells. There's different technicalities that you have to take into consideration if you want to use an artisan well. And we can talk about this all day, but for example, there's a radius that you have to leave without any type of construction around the well. If it's drilled or if it's artisan, that radius is important to understand for your actual construction. Is your property big enough that you can actually leave a certain radius, for example, 40, 50 meters around it? Also, does the municipality, and that's one of the main things to actually obtain construction permits and get them approved by the municipality through an artisan well that doesn't have to be registered. Does the municipality have a zoning plan, what we call in Spanish plan regulador? If it doesn't, it just directs you to the water law in Costa Rica, specifically Article 7, that talks about the possibility of everyone being able to actually get water from their property and apply for permits. So it's a great question, but no, artisan wells are literally the ones that you hand dig to get, to actually make a hole in your property, and you hire somebody or you do it yourself and actually obtain water from that well.
So purchasing property here, Fredrick, what's better? Purchasing property through your name or purchasing property through a corporation?
There's no right or wrong answer on that. It all depends on what you want to do with your property, really. And if you want to save some yearly costs, if you want to, for example, if you tell me that you're going to put it out on the short-term rental pool, I'll for sure advise you on buying it through a corporation, just because the property is going to be held in a corporation. It's going to be rented out to third parties, and situations can occur with those third parties, and you don't want the liability getting carried over to yourself on your personal name. So in that type of situations, it's better to buy it through a corporation. But in Costa Rica, anybody can buy property as if they are Costa Ricans. There's no really any type of limitation to that. So it all depends. If you're gonna buy your property for your personal use and you're gonna be living here in Costa Rica, you can buy it on your personal name. But if you're gonna, for example, buy properties just as an investment to build something and flip, or you're not gonna be living here, maybe it's good to buy it in a corporation, just because if you're not in Costa Rica or not able to come and you eventually want to sell it, or you need to grant powers of attorney for something in Costa Rica, construction or whatever that is for you, you'll be able to grant them without being in Costa Rica if you own the property through a corporation. Different than if you own it on your personal name, then you'll have to be granting those powers of attorney in your personal name. And one important thing in Costa Rica is that many things in Costa Rica still work with wet signatures. Only Costa Ricans have the possibility of obtaining what we call a digital signature in Costa Rica, or Costa Ricans or people with a DMX card with permanent or temporary residency approved in Costa Rica. So if you don't actually have a residency approved in Costa Rica or not a TICO, then you need to wet sign the majority of documents that need to eventually get notarized. Yep. And remember, the notary public in Costa Rica can only notarize things that were granted in front of him, literally. So those are important matters to take into consideration when deciding if you want to buy your property on your personal name or, on behalf of a corporation. So Daniel, what would you say would be the most important thing of working with high detail oriented firms such as Tamarindo Real Estate and you'll be as your legal counsel?
Well, Fredrick, I think really the big difference is working with a boutique company that's more custom to your needs and really is attentive to what you're looking for and understands what your approach is, what your lifestyle is. It really tailors to what you are looking for. And what you're going to find is basically people that are genuinely looking for your best interest and actually doing the fiduciary responsibility of being a realtor and being an agent and also being an attorney in the client's best interest. You know, our difference is that we care about the client's needs and we also care about what exactly their ultimate goal is, which is purchasing property, having it be a very smooth transaction, and also being able to be content with your purchase and see the value in it later on as if it does appreciate over time, or if you enjoy it for a couple of years with your family, or those are really the true values of a property here.
Yeah, at the end, I think one of the things that we share and the type of services that we provide to the public is that we don't care about the actual transaction only. We care about long-lasting relationships, which eventually, yeah, they'll bring more transactions and stuff, but we care about things that actually matter, and it's that the client ends up being happy. And the majority of clients of ours, we always end up being friends with them, which they say it's easier than a client becomes a friend than a friend becomes a client, and it actually happens. So yeah, I'll definitely say that, and especially talking from a legal perspective, it makes a big difference when you know that your attorney is not only your attorney, but it's your legal counsel, which actually answers the phone, which actually answers WhatsApp, answers emails on time, and actually gets the job done. And the same happened with realtors. Realtors, if you get a realtor that actually cares about your investment, cares about your next move, then that's the person that answers the phone, that actually takes the time to take you to see properties, to actually follow up with you, to actually put up a plan to show you why this is the property that actually matches what you're actually looking for, and not only sticks what you're telling them as a client, but also tries to help you find the answer that you're looking for when you come to Costa Rica and try to get something to build up your patrimony.
Yeah. So Fred, what's the difference, or what would you say is something that you guys take great importance in during the due diligence process that you feel like other real estate attorneys fail to look into?
That's a great question. I would say one of the main differences is that we never miss that or forget that at the end the due diligence process is not for us, it's for the client. So that's the reason why we put together every single item that we just discussed about due diligence, and basically produce a due diligence report for the client. And before the due diligence term expires, let's say it's a 30-day term, on day around 24th, 25th or so, we provide this due diligence report to our clients with all the conclusions, with all the details of whatever we have reviewed during the term, and actually provide recommendations to the client so that the client is the one who can actually take the decision of moving forward with the transaction or not. Therefore, the client has a legal handbook, if we can call it that way, and that actually helps them take an informed decision of moving forward or not with the transaction. So before let's say the 30-day term of due diligence expires, the client actually tells us, yeah, I want to move forward as is, or maybe let's inform the seller that there's something going on with the property and we want it fixed before we close. So it helps move forward the transaction in a secure manner, not only for us as professionals, but mainly for the client. The client, sometimes in due diligence, certain items pop up that are not deal breakers, but that can be fixed before closing. Yeah. So that's the way that we handle it, and it has always worked perfectly fine throughout the years with the clients, and the clients actually love just having the handbook, like the due diligence report, because at the end they can save it for their records, and it also helps them in the future when they want to resell the property. They can just provide this due diligence report to their buyers in the future, and they're basically doing 80-90% of the job for their attorneys. Yeah. So it helps basically ease transactions in the future.
And if I may add, I think what really helps is, they're probably going to end up using you again because you have a full report and you also didn't waste any of their time. See, one thing that I do notice a lot in this market is that there's a lot of attorneys that, like Fredrick said, think the due diligence period is for them, but it's not. It's for the buyer or the seller. So you need to be extremely cautious about respecting the due diligence period because there are some attorneys out there that won't, and it's going to not only inconvenience your schedule and your plans, but it's also going to prolong the closing date, which in the end of the day, the whole process is to purchase the property and make it smooth. So Fred, what happens during and after closing?
That's a great question. So basically, at closing, the actual documents that produce closing are either, and depending the way that we, as the parties decide to move forward with the transaction or with the closing on transaction, it can happen through the execution of private documents only, the combination between private and public documents, or only public documents. What do I mean by private or public? Private, for example, a share purchase and sale agreement, when you buy the shares of a corporation that actually holds the asset, or, for example, when you buy the title of that property, that you have to, according to Costa Rican regulations, execute a public title transfer deed. This public title transfer deed is signed and authorized in a notary book that only notary publics in Costa Rica, have. And notary publics in Costa Rica, different from the States or Canada, notary publics in Costa Rica are all licensed attorney that have a special degree that's called the notary public. And what happens after closing? Many, and I've seen this, hundreds of times, attorneys grant the closing deed, file it before the public registry, and that's it. They don't do anything afterwards. And one of the most important things is to actually complete the whole process. So what's that completing the whole process look like? It's actually declaring the change of ownership before the local municipality, changing the names of the utilities before the corresponding authorities, be it the AIAs we just discussed previously, ASADA, Cope Guanacaste, ICE, many other items that come after due diligence. For example, letting know the HOA of the condominium that the property has changed ownership, providing the information of the new owners to that HOA, as well as the municipality when you file the declaration of the change of ownership. Those are very important matters that we at our firm we handle, and basically it's customary and it's a must. We don't close any type of transaction without actually completing those additional steps after closing.
So Fred, what should buyers expect for closing costs? And what exactly are they getting from the closing costs?
Great question also. Always the price point that I like to let my clients know of what to expect depending on the property price that they're gonna invest in. It's the 3.65%. And how is that 3.65% broken down? First, you have to add 1.5% of transfer taxes that you will always have to pay. On top of that, you have to add the 0.9%, which is like other closing stamps that you have to pay to the public registry. And on top of that is the notary or attorney fee. Usually that notary or attorney fee is over 1%. And many law firms, what they do is they break down different added-on services that they include. For example, incorporating a corporation to buy the property, granting a power of attorney to represent the client at closing, additional services, like, for example, the first declarations that all companies have to file before the local authorities and stuff. At our firm, what we do is we just give our clients a flat fee that is 1.25%, and that's it. So it's 1.25%. It includes absolutely everything. It doesn't matter if the transaction, we invested 30 hours of our professional time during that transaction, or we invested 100 hours. It doesn't matter. And in that same fee, we include the corporation, the initial filings that have to be done. So the client knows from day one that they present an offer the exact cost that they will end up paying at closing for closing costs. Flat rate, client knows everything from the beginning, transparency, and thorough process.
Fred, a really important question is, as a foreign buyer, what would be the best structure to purchase a property? What type of corporation style would be the best for a foreign buyer that also might have, an LLC or some sort of trust in the States where they would need to have their properties tied in a very secure manner here?
So in Costa Rica, we have different types of corporations, but the most recommended one for real estate investment, the majority of times would be the same type of company as an LLC, a U.S. LLC, which in Costa Rica we call them SRLs, or in Spanish, Sociedad Responsabilidad Limitada. Why is the core reason why we recommend this? Obviously, before actually just deciding on which type of company to recommend the client to go to, we ask the client, first of all, if they have any type of estate planning back home or any type of structure with inheritance purposes. Why? Because it's not only important with foreign investors to understand and advise them on a local perspective, but also something that can be eventually tied up to their patrimony or estate planning back home. So this type of corporation, as the SRL, same as LLC in the US, serves as a pass-through entity that can be used for US tax purposes. So for example, if you buy a property in Costa Rica, and let's say you buy it for $1 million, you build the house and then you sell it for $2.3 million, and let's say from that selling price, your profit is, $400,000. If you get those $4,000 as a profit, you can, and you have incorporated an SRL, same as LLC in the US, it serves as a pass-through entity. Therefore, you can pay your capital gains in Costa Rica, which the majority of times is way lower than the capital gains back home, if you're talking, let's say, the US or Canada. And you can use that tax payment in Costa Rica for capital gains as a tax credit in the States because you incorporated and you made your investment through an SRL. So it serves as a pass-through entity, and you don't get double tax capital gains wise. So you just pay the corresponding capital gains in Costa Rica, and you use that payment as a tax credit in the States, and you only pay the difference in the States or the state from where you're from to pay capital gains in both countries, or the state in the US and in Costa Rica, as you should be paying when making profit in a foreign country. On top of what we were just discussing, it's very important to ask the real estate attorney that you're going to hire in Costa Rica if they have any type of experience dealing with US or Canada estate planning, if they have any type of experience dealing with foreign attorneys as well. Many times with our clients that are investors from other countries, we have initial calls with their attorneys, and we basically work together to tie everything up to their patrimony, so you don't have loose ends everywhere. Yeah. Aside from this, yes, it's always good to also have a will in Costa Rica, so that then your estate doesn't have to, if something happens to you, bring what we call an exequatur, which is an international resolution that can be executed in Costa Rica if they open your estate back home. Yes, there's ways of facilitating that part of everything, but if we can actually avoid a lot of that part of the whole process for your family members or your heirs, it's always good. It's always great actually if you can hire an attorney that also understands foreign patrimony or estate planning and can help you tie everything up from day one of your investment.
So Fred, what is the typical term for a closing process? So how long would it take normally?
Good question. It all depends on the type of property or investment that you're buying. Why? Because it's not the same time that you need for due diligence if you're buying a fully built condo than if you're buying raw land to actually develop a condominium or develop a luxury home, or however we want to call it. So, customary timeframes in Costa Rica would be 30-day due diligence, between 21 and 30-day due diligence. The first 10 business days are used usually to commence the escrow process, sign the escrow agreement, share with the escrow company that we choose all the KYC documents, source of origin, and everything related, and to wire the initial deposit into escrow, which is typically 10% of the purchase price. After that, and at the same time that we start working on the due diligence documents, we open escrow, and everything is working in parallel. So once the due diligence term expires, we usually close the transactions between the following 5 to 10 business days. Those 5 to 10 business days, we basically, prepare all the closing documents, share with the counterparty's attorneys for them to review, to approve, and then we close. After that comes all the post-closing matters that we had discussed before, but all those post-closing matters are usually handled by us as your attorneys and our firm, and you don't have to worry about that as a client.
So Fred, during the closing process, there's like these final things that you need to wrap up. Like, for example, if you had employees, if you have pending electricity bills, pending water bill, what is the process, or more or less, how do you guys handle it? Because really it's a matter of how the attorneys continue their follow-up work after closing.
That's a great question. There's different ways of tackling those items at closing. Would be, first of all, and the most used way would be to, between the time that a due diligence is approved and closing day, we usually ask for, the counterparty's attorney to make sure to write off and pay all severance to employees, to basically bring up to date all the utility invoices. But many times those invoices don't come during that small 5 to 10 day term. So the other way that we also tackle this is leave a holdback in escrow of about between $500 to $1,000, just to make sure that we can pay off all invoices or bills for utilities, or any type of severance that is left over. If there's gardeners or any type of employee in the property that needs to be paid off, and there's any remaining or balance that needs to be paid to them, just to cover it out from that small portion of money that's kept in escrow. But also, since we've identified all the investing pains of our clients when they come to a brand new country and after closing they don't know what to do or how to pay their utilities and everything, at our firm we've built up a team that we call the accounting team. So this team specializes in all those post-closing matters, including, assisting our clients with utility payments for a small monthly fee. And also we help our clients open bank accounts in Costa Rica so that they can manage their own funds. And also we show them literally through a couple of hours of explanation, sitting down with the client virtually or physically, and basically showing them how to use their Costa Rican online banking system so that they can pay their own water, electricity, internet, and everything else, such as we did with our recent client, Sarah.
Yeah. So Fred, there's also, a lot of transactions take a little bit of time, but what would be like the shortest amount of time you think you guys could wrap up a transaction from start to closing?
That's a very tricky question to answer, just because it all depends on the type of property. However, we've had clients that, sometimes make a really strong offer in a property with the promise to close in 2-3 weeks. We can also do that. I mean, we will adjust as long as it's legally possible. Yeah. We will adjust timeframes to work according to what the client wants to do. For example, if a client comes and says, I want to close in 2 weeks, but there's I want to make a really strong offer, but the attractive to the seller would be the really fast time frame to close, We will definitely work on that. As long as the seller has all the documents that we will need to review, we would of course work on that and make everything possible to close on that short time frame. So it's basically, we will not close our doors to just say, no, if it's not 21 days or 30 days, we are not able to make it. We work according to what the client actually wants and needs, as long as it's legally possible. We will not and never overpromise to a client, but we will definitely make sure to make our best effort to close on the proposed time frame so that the transaction can go through.
So Fred, a really important question that I think a lot of foreign buyers ask is, do foreign buyers have the same rights for purchasing property, and do they have the same protection purchasing property here?
Absolutely. The law in Costa Rica actually allows both foreigners and Costa Ricans to own property with the same kind of rights from each other. So there's no differentiation on that regard. Now, from a seller perspective, there is a differentiation specifically directed to capital gains. Starting from the 6th of October of 2025, a new law came into play in which the capital gain tax for foreigners was amended. So, regarding capital gains, and now we can also talk about capital gains, if we all know that if you bought your property before the 1st of July of 2019, you can pay 2.25% for capital gains calculated over the whole purchase price. And if you bought it after the 1st of July of 2019, you can pay 15% over your capital gain only. Now, starting from the 6th of October of 2025, foreigners, there's only one change, and it only applies to foreigners. They now have to pay 2.5%, not 2.25, 2.5% over the whole purchase price, but with one additional interesting change. Now the buyer has to withhold that closing, that 2.5%, until the seller files the capital gains declaration, and then the amount of the 2.5% can be released to the seller, or either paid directly by buyer to the governmental authority. Now, we all know that there's one specific and interesting loophole to that in Costa Rica. That is, if you're selling your property that is considered your main residence for the first time, you can actually use that and not pay capital gains for one single time in a lifetime. So how does that apply to foreigners? Because that's the topic, right? What is the difference between ticos and foreigners with regards to different, owning property in Costa Rica? So with foreigners cannot use this exemption. Now, if you are a permanent resident in Costa Rica and have lived in the property and stayed in the country for more than 180 days, we always like to say 181 days, then you can use that example and use your, that sale as declared as your personal residence and not pay capital gain tax for once in a lifetime. But only if you comply with those additional requirements, then you can use that, loophole that the law in Costa Rica gives you.
So I guess the final takes of today's video is basically, choose the right agent and choose the right attorney that's going to actually contact you and inform you immediately, and also be available for calls whenever you have questions. And
if you need immediate advice, call us.